Hello, so today we are going to be doing chapter 3 on economics. I've had the demands and I've had what you guys wanted. So we are going to be doing chapter 3 and all the way. And after chapter 3, we are going to be doing the questions on the scope. So make sure that you keep up with my channel. You keep up with the videos. Now, with that being said, let's focus on chapter 3 and proceed to the next chapter. And please do not forget to subscribe. So chapter 3 is about production, spending, and income in a mixed economy. So let's dive into this chapter. I am going to read out the objectives that you have to know, at least the things that you have to know after we have done this chapter. Okay, so first one is that you must be able to differentiate or talk about the relationship between income, production, and expenditure, which is the money, all right, and distinguish between stocks and flows, all right, and then describe the different sources of production and income, right, and distinguish between household and firms, and show how their decisions and actions are interrelated, how their decisions and action lead to one another, basically zihlangene, and then show how the government sector interacts with household and firms. You show how the government in the secular flow work with the government and firms, right, and show how the foreign sector interact with the domestic economy. So show how the outside world intersect with the economy of South Africa. This is what they mean here, the foreign sector, obviously. And then describe South Africa's factor endowment, right? But then I do not think that will be important, but we'll see if we get there. Now what I want to do is to give you a brief summary or a brief overview of the chapter, but then sticking to what is important. So okay, so now without being said, let's describe the relationship between income and expenditure. Okay, so let's talk about the relationship between income, production, and expenditure. Production creates income, and then income is used to spend on goods and services. Now, all of this happens at the same time, right? Okay, I'll be moving on to that, right? If you have any queries, leave a comment, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. And okay, let's move on to what was the second objective. Distinguish between stocks and flows, right? So stocks, right, stocks are those variables, right, that you can measure at any time, right? Stocks you can measure at any time. But then the flows are those variables that you can measure after a specific period, right? For example, a stock you can measure at any time, like let's say for example the growth in population. You can measure the growth of population at any time, right? But then let's talk about productivity, the production. You can measure production after a certain period. So you have to say, okay, I'll look for production from March to April. There is a period, but then with stocks, you can just say let's look at the bed rate without having to look at the period. You just look at the bed rate. Or another example about stocks that you can take into mind that they made on the economics book is that, take for example the level of the water. The level of the water, you can measure it at a specific point in time, right? Let's say I'll measure it on 1 October by 12 a.m. at this water level. So those are your stocks, right? And the flows, I say, are those variables that you can measure after a period of time, right? So without being said, let's move on to the next objective of this video. Remember, it's chapter 3. We are getting to the good stuff, which is chapter 4 up to 12. Okay, so now we are going to be moving to the different sources of production, right? I mean, the factors of production, obviously, that's what they're being called. So the first factor of production is going to be the natural resources. Some other people call it land, but then it's natural resources. So what you have to know about natural resources is that natural resources are a gift from nature. Once they are used, they cannot be replaced, and their supply is fixed. once gold, let me make an example about gold. Once you dig up gold and then that gold is being used in the production, you can no longer find another gold. You see, once it has been extracted from the ground, it's over, right? You can never find it where you extracted it. So hence I'm saying the supply of natural resources is fixed. It doesn't just escalate, because you cannot, it's not every day you find gold, right? After a gold has been mined, that's just it, right? So let's move on to another factor of production. The second factor of production is labor, which is also known as the human resource. Now labor is described as is labor is described as an exercise of human mental and physical effort in the production of goods and services. So labor is the human effort in the production of goods and services, right? The physical effort that you put into producing a cookie, producing bread, producing whatever that is a good or service, that is labor. Ne? And in nowadays, some production processes are labor intensive, some of them are capital intensive. But then we'll get into that, I don't know, maybe in another slide or in another video. But then do make sure that you request if you want something like this. And this video is going to be long, I don't wanna lie. So there's a division of labor, and the division of labor, it saves time, and it enables workers to take tasks that they are suitable for, and it enables workers to develop a specific skill and better quality, right? There is worker alignment, which is losing interest in the quality of work if the division of labor is not put into place. And then there is human capital, which is the skills, knowledge and health of workers, right? So without being said, let's move on to another factor of production, which is capital, right? So capital include all manufactured resources such as tools, machines and buildings. Capital goods are produced to produce other goods, and this is where we get into place. Remember I talked about being capital intensive, right? So machines, when you talk about something that are capital intensive, we talk about machines and all that. In economics, when you talk about capital, we do not talk about capital that you guys talk about in accounting, whereas starting a business. No, in economics, capital refers to machines, yeah, it refers to machines, tools and buildings, right? We talk about those type of capital. And capital can be tangible things to produce other things, which is intermediate good, right? And then the fourth factor of production, which is entrepreneurship. Now entrepreneurship are those people who take risk, or it is the process of taking a risk, right, in producing goods that are expected to be sold. Now entrepreneurs are the driving force of production. Like without entrepreneurs there wouldn't be production. So I hope I made myself clear. And there is technology, I don't know, but technology is counted as the fifth factor of production. The discovery of knowledge and new intervention, those things. So in our days, technology is also a factor of production. When it is put into practice of goods and service, it is called innovation. So technology goes with innovation. Another thing is that money is not a factor of production. It is something which facilitates the exchange of goods and services. So someone might even say money is the medium of exchange, right? It cannot be used to produce goods and services. Hence, we say money is not the factor of production. So another thing that we close off with, it is the choice of technique. It depends on the availability and quality of factors of production as well as their relative cost. So the cost that you choose to produce a good and services depends on the relative cost, right? The cost of technique, all those things. So without being said, let's move on to, remember I talked about the factors of production, eh? So there is a remuneration of factors of production. So for example, labor is remunerated through wages and salaries, right? And entrepreneurship is remunerated through profit, right? And land is remunerated through rent, and capital is remunerated through interest. That's just it. Okay, so we move on to the conclusion of this chapter, or we're closer to concluding this chapter. For before we conclude this chapter, we're going to look at the last topic, or the last subtopic, which is source of spending entities, right? So basically, the people who spend in the economy. So first thing first, we have household. Household are all the people who live together and make joint economic decisions, or subject to others who can make decisions for them. Like if you a household, I am a household, you are a household. Basically, we are all households because we make joint decisions. As soon as you decide what to buy, you are a household. So household, they consume goods and services, they sell their factors of production in order to produce goods and services. Um, the total spending of household is called consumption. Although household own their factors of production, but they cannot satisfy their human wants directly, which is when they need to go sell their factors of production to the factor market in order to produce goods and services, in which they also have to buy those goods and services. Yeah, I'm told it's economics. It's a flow. It's We'll talk about the flow, right? And after I'm a household, they sell their vectors of production, right? To produce goods and services. In return, they earn income because their vectors of production, after they have been employed, they become labor and they get remunerated from labor. And let's move on to the firms, right? Firms are those companies who produce goods and services for us, right? So it can be partnership, close corporations, but then let's define it according to the book. The book says it can be defined as a unit that employs factors of production to be sold at the goods market. So firms, they employ factors of production to produce goods and services. So then those goods, they can be sold at the factor market, right? So firms are all about production. Firms are all about producing goods and services that can satisfy human needs and wants, right? The people who own a firm are household, but when they make economic decisions on what to produce, them based on their view or profession of the firm, not as a household. Yes, when house like firms are owned by household, right? But then when they choose what to produce, how to produce it, they do not look at it as a household, they look at it as a profession. Like they are on their professional state of saying, okay, we are a firm, let's produce this in order to satisfy that. So you get it. Thank you. And then responsible for spending of capital goods. So armor firms, they are the one who spend on capital goods, right? And are represented by I don't know, we'll get to that. And then there is government. Government is the largest spender in the South African economy. I do not know about other economies, but then South Africa, government is the largest spender, because if government spends on government spending, people get employed, there's a lot of money in the economy, which causes inflation, which causes demand pull inflation, all of those. But then we have not reached to that point. So government is anything that is owned by and controlled by the state as a representative of people. And remember, government is a group of people, but then government include politicians, civil engineer, government agencies, and other bodies belonging or owned by the government, right? So all the government officials are part of the government sector, but they are also members of household. All those people who you see in the government are also household, like bangabantu nabo, and they demand goods and services. But then when they're in the government, they are at that position of being a government, like they view economy as not according to their household individuals. So what does government do in the economy? So the government is responsible for expenditure on goods and services. The government also charges taxes on household and firms, which is government spending is represented by G. And when the government taxes businesses, it is represented by T. And then the transfer of payments, the transfer of income expenditure from certain individuals and groups to other individual groups. Like if you sell a house, you're going to pay a transfer tax, something like that. So government is involved in that. And then there's a foreign sector. A foreign sector is someone who is not involved in the South African economy, right? Someone who's outside the South African economy. And then when they sell good to the South African economy, they import. And then when we sell good to them, we export, right? So various flows from South Africa and the rest of the world are summarized in the balance of payment. All countries and institutions outside the borders of the South African economy are foreign sectors. And when you summarize this, your equation is C plus I plus G plus X minus Z. So C is consumer spending, I is firms, G is government, X is export, Z is import. Now we get into the last thing that we have to talk about, which is the macroeconomic objectives, which is full employment, price stability, balance of payment stability, economic growth, socially acceptable distribution of income. And without being said, there are a few things that are left which I can show you, but then I don't know if you can see it, but these are what I talked about. You see this? It is a flow, right? So let me change the angle. What do you have to know about chapter 3 is that there is production, spending, and income, right? Production creates income, and income causes spending, and all of these happen at the same time. So when income include rent, salaries, and wages, profit, and interest, then production include other factors of production, then spending is consumer spending, government by firms, government export and import, right? Then there is a circular flow of goods and services. The circular flow of goods and services is this, but then in another view, where we have firms, household, factor, market, and then the we have the market for goods and services, which is the goods market, right? Consumers sell their factor of production to the factor market. The factor market, then they produce goods and services. After produced goods and services, those goods and services goes to the good market, and then they go to household. It's a flow, right? And then the circular flow of income and spending. So remember, on that flow, household were selling goods and services. Now household earn income from selling their factors of production, and then they spend that income to goods and services, and then that income is paid to firms, and then firms pay for factors of production. It's a flow. It goes like that. And then this is a combination of of circular flow of goods and services and a circular flow of spending. This is a combination of all of them, right? We have government, we have factor market, we have firms, we have goods market, we have household. And then there was supposed to be a foreign sector, but then there is none. So these are the microeconomic objectives that I was talking about. We have come to an end of this chapter, which is chapter 3 on microeconomics. And please make sure you like, you comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video about chapter 4.